Hello everyone, welcome back again to the disaster management classes. In the previous class, we have learned some of the natural disasters and how to manage them. So, as part of these different stages of disaster management, how to deal with natural disasters like earthquakes, landslides and avalanches, floods, etc., we have already covered. Now, in this particular lecture, we are going to continue our discussion further on natural disasters. So, let me quickly share the screen with you so that I can give you what is the learning objectivity today. See, this other shaded color, these are the three disasters which we have already covered. Okay. And while covering them, we followed the pattern that what is that disaster and what is the mechanism of it, how does it happen, then what are the causes or the factors influencing that, then we looked at consequences or impacts, then finally we looked at what are the mitigation and management of these disasters, like with respect to mitigation, with respect to preparedness, with respect to response, with respect to recovery, what kind of steps can be taken in order to reduce the impact of these disasters. So that's what we learned. Now, in this particular session, let us cover three more, that is cyclones, tsunamis, and droughts. How, like here also we will follow the same mechanism that we have followed earlier. We'll understand what is it and what is the mechanism and what are the causes and consequences and how to reduce this impact through various mitigation and management strategies. What are the existing ones and what can be further improved here? So that is how we are going to proceed further. So let us begin with the very first one, that is cyclones. See, what is a cyclone? A cyclone is a violent storm covering a vast extent of area. See, over the oceans, particularly, please remember when I am talking here, my entire focus is on tropical cyclones, not the temperate cyclones, because India is less vulnerable to temperate cyclones. These cyclones can be divided into two types. One is tropical, another one is temperate. Okay. So generally, based on their latitudinal expanse, we give these names. And also, of course, the mechanism. So when we are talking the cyclones here, we are mainly focusing on tropical cyclones to which India is more vulnerable. Okay, and these cyclones only occur on the oceans. Okay, but temperate ones, they can occur on the land or on the oceans. Only temperate disturbances that we can get, or the cyclonic disturbances that we can get, is during your winter months. But those temperate cyclonic disturbances were also not so harmful for us, rather they were beneficial for our rabi crops. See, western disturbances, you can say they are the type of temperate cyclones that occur in India. Okay, so latitudinally, if you look at India's position, much of India, most of it is in the tropics and subtropics. Only some portion of it comes under your temperate locations. That's why it has less vulnerability to temperate cyclones. So when I'm talking about cyclone here, my entire focus is on tropical cyclone which occurs here in the Indian Ocean. Okay, so that is the main focus, please remember that. Now proceeding further, so these are violent storms characterized by very high velocity winds, rotating velocity of winds, along with along with uh, intense rainfall. Okay, intense rainfall. And say how what is the mechanism, how does this happen, what are the conditions prerequisite for development of a tropical cyclone? See, there are certain conditions which required, then we will enter into the mechanism. So what are the conditions? See, the conditions include first and foremost the sea surface temperature must be more than or equal to 27 degrees or so. So there should be warm sea surface waters. Okay, in the oceans there should be warm sea surface waters, because this high sea surface temperature is going to provide the latent heat by moisturizing the oceanic waters. So this is one condition. Second condition is there must be pre-existing low pressure. Why low pressure? Because we are talking about a cyclone. Cyclones always built on low pressure center, whereas anticyclones they built on high pressure center. So at the center there should be pre-existing low pressure, okay, or at least a depression should be there. Then the third thing is there must be existence of Coriolis force. So this is a Coriolis force. This is a force which is generated due to rotation of the earth, and the Coriolis force is almost zero at the equator and it is maximum at the poles. So near the equator the chance of developing a tropical cyclone is less. So it should be like 5 or 10 degrees north or south of equator in order to have a good amount of Coriolis force, which can create that swirling movement, or which can create that rotating movement to your winds, which are entering into this low pressure. See, the mechanism is simple. In the center there should be low pressure, so obviously outside there will be high pressure. Now wind comes from high pressure to low pressure from all directions. Generally it comes in this manner, but when there is existence of Coriolis force, it will start rotating under the influence of it. Understood? So these are the conditions, plus there must be like upper divergence of the wind so that it can expand and become bigger and bigger. Smaller you can say thunderstorms, they combine to become a bigger violent storm. So there must be upper divergence, and there must be calm winds, because if there are gusty winds then they will take it up, they will take this moisture or latent heat from one location to another location, thereby not leading to building up of a cyclonic disturbance. So calm winds. So these are all the necessary conditions. If these conditions are there, then slowly a depression can turn into a violent storm, which we call it as a cyclone. Now, what is the mechanism of it? Initially, when the sea surface temperature, okay, roughly 26-27 degrees or so, when it is there, so there will be evaporation of the water. So this evaporated water rises up, okay, and as it is rising, so obviously condensation will happen as the temperature reduces, and that releases the latent heat. So initially it leads to building up of many smaller storms, okay, or you can say thunderstorms will be developed. And as the time progresses and as this low pressure intensifies, all of them under these influences, under the influence of Coriolis force, they start rotating. Okay, so as this further intensifies, further latent heat of condensation from the vaporization comes, so this further intensifies and finally turns into a very big violent storm with very huge velocity winds. So the speed of the wind may even reach up to 200 to 250 kilometers per hour. Okay, it can turn into such a severe storm. Okay, so this is the mechanism of it. Okay, so what did we learn? What is cyclone? Types of cyclones, okay, why we are focusing only on the tropical cyclones, and what are the conditions required for tropical cyclones, and what is the actual mechanism of it. So far this is clear, right? Yeah. Now let us enter and see occurrences. Okay, see, India is highly vulnerable to these tropical cyclones. Every year, every now and then you can see a cyclone. almost 3 to 4 cyclones visit both the coasts of India. Okay, so both east coast and west coast. See, India with a coastline of, like including islands, with a coastline of almost 7,500 kilometers, and this is falling in the tropical location. Okay, and tropical locations means there is more vertical incidence of the sun. That means sea surface temperature is more, plus this Indian Ocean route is also very busy with respect to international trade, so that also increases the temperature of the sea surface. As a result of all these, both Bay of Bengal and the Arabian Sea, that is part of Indian Ocean, they are highly vulnerable to these cyclones, and the frequency is getting increased. Why? Because of climate change. As the climate change is increasing the global average temperatures, that is also increasing the sea surface temperature. So more and more cyclones are being formed. Even recently also we have seen Remal, and before that we have seen Jasper, Mauchang, and no Hamoon, Tej, Biparjai, Mokha. There are so many uh, cyclones, and with varying degree of their intensity, leading to different locations being vulnerable to that devastation by these tropical cyclones. Okay, so occurrences, as you are going for the examination, you focus on the recent 1 or 2 years occurrences. You will get 5 or 6 examples. You don't have to write only these examples, but there are some which are once in a while variety of them. Like for example, you can write about hudhud or phylline, okay, or feni. These are all like they had a peculiar behavior, their strength was different, so you may have to focus on them particularly because they may ask a specific question on them. Okay, now these are some examples or recent occurrences. Now, what is the impact of it? Okay, so I'm directly entering, I'm not focusing much on the cyclones because that part we will cover it in geography section, because it is also one of the geophysical phenomena, you can say climatological phenomena, meteorological phenomena. We cover it there. We cover with a comparison with the temperate cyclones. If you want, let me know. We'll find some other session to discuss on them. Okay, now what is the impact of these cyclones? Okay, see, causes I have already discussed. What is the causes? Like climate change is cause, and then you can say the conditions are causes itself, like having high sea surface temperature. See, recent times, as more and more international trade is happening, more and more traffic on the seas are happening, that is also increasing your sea surface temperature. Plus the draining of rivers, fresh water into the oceans, and that too they are coming from the land, so always the water which comes from the land will be warmer because land will have a high latent heat and sorry, high specific heat, and as the waters are coming from this land, they get heated up and they mix with the ocean and increasing the sea surface temperature of the ocean. Okay, plus climate change is another reason. So these are all some of the reasons or causes. Now, what is the impact of these cyclones? Number one, see, it will lead to intense rainfalls. Now, whenever we have intense rainfalls, we can have floods, we can have coastal inundation, we can have shifting of the rivers, we can have dam failures, okay, urban floods. These are all one case. Then see, due to drowning in this flood kind of situation or intense rainfalls, it can lead to death of humans or livestock or even crop loss. Okay, so crop loss due to floods or rainfall. So when there is a crop loss, obviously there will be food insecurity and inflation may rise, particularly the food inflation. Then outbreak of waterborne diseases like epidemics, diarrhea, okay, cholera, jaundice, viral infection, whatever that we have seen due to floods can also happen. Water pollution can happen, like contamination of the fresh water with sewage water or municipal water, okay, or let's say some other polluted water. It can happen due to overflowing, or it can also lead to storm surge. See, storm surge is itself a disaster. Storm surge मतलब क्या होता है? Generally, let's say this is India, and here somewhere in Bay of Bengal there is a cyclone, tropical cyclones. Generally the movement of these cyclones will be like due to rotation of the earth from west to east. See, earth is rotating from west to east, and as a result of it, your cyclones, generally the general movement of the cyclones will be from east to west. So if there is a cyclone in, let's say, Bay of Bengal, it will move towards the eastern coast. And if there is a cyclone in, let's say, Arabian Sea, it will move towards the Middle East or East African Valley, etc. Okay, westward direction. Now, let's say if this cyclone is moving towards India, and the moment it comes to the coast, it comes to the land, we call it as landfall. There, what happens? There is cutting off this latent heat or moisture from the water body, and as a result of it the cyclone will die. Okay, so we will have the dissipation of the cyclone. Okay, but however, as this cyclone is coming from the ocean towards the land, okay, here particularly here, so there will be a force. As it is moving with high velocity covering vast area, so there will be a force dragging the water beneath. Along this cyclone movement, some of the waters of the ocean will be dragged. So as this cyclone makes a landfall here, let's say here, so this oceanic water will be dragged by this cyclone and it will surge in that location, leading to coastal inundation, coastal erosion, salt water intrusion, okay, even failure of the coastal crops, okay, let's say sedimentation in the port cities or port areas. Okay, these are all some of the bad impacts. That's why it is also considered as a disaster. So storm surge can happen, okay, or the means of livelihood for the locals, particularly the coastal communities, will be lost. Whenever there is a severe or violent cyclone, there will be a signal dissemination, information dissemination will be given to the coastal community to avoid the ocean for hunting the fish. Okay, so this will lead to loss, and there will be property loss. Okay, property loss. How? See, the speed of the winds may lead to collapsing of the construction sites, or any physical infrastructure may be damaged. Okay, so there is a possibility. Plus infrastructure damage can happen, and the local people, like the coastal people, may lose their property, their life and their livelihood, their livestock and crops, etc. Even their boats are, all these means they may be damaged. So these are all other impacts. Apart from that, see, environmentally speaking, see, it can have severe impact on corals. It can damage the corals, and coral reefs are biodiversity rich, and they are the you can say lungs of the oceans, a rainforest of the oceans, and they can be damaged because of this cyclonic movement. Plus mangroves, which are again very sensitive, very important, biodiversity wise very rich forests. They are also evergreen forests which are found in the tidal locations. They may be damaged because of these high velocity winds. Okay, so this is another environmental impact. So marine ecosystem पे भी impact पड़ेगा, and coastal ecosystem, particularly in transitional zones, there will be impact, and it may cause landslides and soil erosion. So these are all some of the causes. So if you want, you can segregate them. I have put it in general sense. You can segregate them. What is the impact on the society? Okay, so how it will impact the livelihoods and their crops and other things. And then you can talk about the economy, like economic impact. You can talk about infrastructure. Okay, you can talk about the ecosystem, both coastal ecosystem and marine ecosystem, etc. You can segregate and you can discuss these points in a better manner in the presentation. Okay, but these are all overall impacts of these cyclones. Now proceeding further, how these cyclones can be managed and how we can mitigate the impact of it, how at least we can reduce the impact of it. See, first and foremost, our primary purpose is what is to know which areas are more vulnerable. Okay, so for that, what we go with? We go with hazard mapping, hazard mapping or hazard zonation. Now here is the map. Say in the examination or in the answers, please do make it, because I'm getting these ready-made pictures, that's why I'm showing it. But you can create your own diagram. Let's say we need to only show coastal areas because the other areas are not so vulnerable to it. So you can highlight the coastal areas. Okay, so how they are vulnerable. So these are all the areas which are vulnerable. So here also the eastern coast is much vulnerable than the western coast, and of course the islands must be covered. Okay, they are also vulnerable. So this is the vulnerability, and almost entire 7,500 kilometers of coastline of India is vulnerable. Now here also there is this vulnerability profile. There are some areas which are highly prone, for example the eastern coast locations, and some parts of your let's say Gujarat coast. Okay, and there are some locations which are less vulnerable. Comparatively, you see the western coast is less vulnerable because they this is also a case study, you can say, why Bay of Bengal, the frequency of cyclones and their severity is much higher compared to Arabian Sea. The reasons are few. One is this particular portion is more enclosed because it is a Bay of Bengal, more enclosed. So inclusivity means higher sea surface temperatures. Second reason is, say, near to it there is Pacific Ocean and only some islands are there. So in Pacific Ocean also certain cyclones can happen and they will move towards the east, that is towards the Bay of Bengal. And over the islands they can sustain and they can migrate to Bay of Bengal and they can intensify once again. So this is another chance, another no reason. The third reason is whatever the cyclone that happens here, it will move towards the east. So obviously hitting the coast. Whereas if there is a cyclone here, it will move towards the no west, from east to west. Sorry, movement. Always remember the cyclonic movement is east to west. Okay, like this. So it will move towards the west. That means it is going towards the Middle East and East Africa, not impacting much on this western coast. So these are all few reasons. So first step is knowing which locations are vulnerable. Okay. Second is, say, creating multi-purpose cyclonic shelters. Okay, shelters which are resilient from flooding, resilient from high velocity winds. So these multi-purpose cyclone shelters with proper building codes, they can be used as common uh, community buildings during the normal times, and during the cyclonic conditions they can be used as cyclone centers. Say normal times you can use it as a school, or you can use it as a hospital, you can use it as some library or something, but when there is a cyclone you can use it as a shelter. So this is one structural measure. Second thing is designing a early warning system, robust early warning system. This is also a part of your mitigation and also preparedness. See, we have now good satellites, good weather prediction, weather monitoring satellites are there, remote sensing satellites are there. Okay, and better data no acquisition plus processing. Okay, and there is also good information dissemination, good connectivity is there. Now constantly monitor over the vulnerable areas to see if there is, like, we can measure the pressure points as well. We can say whether there is a low pressure point or whether there is a depression, whether it is turning into a cyclone. Immediately that information can be given to the local people so that they can be evacuated to some safe location. Okay, thereby reducing the life loss and property loss. Then also training the local communities. Nowadays local communities are being given proper training and capacity building, so that instead of crying for help they become you can say fighters during those crisis situations. Okay, this can be done with the involvement of like various authorities, and we do have dedicated battalions. National Disaster Response Force is there, they can also train them. Okay, at times like operations like Operation Pralaya Sahayam has been conducted in Hyderabad to train the locals how to deal with the flood situation or urban flood. Okay, such trainings can be made so that we can reduce their vulnerability. Then say IMD, Indian Meteorological Department, which is also a regionally specialized center in the Indian Ocean region. Say World Meteorological Organization has divided these entire ocean basins into 6 regional centers, and each of these regional centers, one dedicated institution has been given the primary role of naming the cyclones and monitoring them and also communicating with the other nations with respect to it. So in our Indian Ocean region there are 13 countries. Okay, so these 13 countries, they gave 13 names each, and together we have 169 names repository. And whenever cyclone happens, IMD, it focuses and it tracks, it completely guides the other 13 countries by giving the warnings and naming the cyclone and all. And the same IMD, in order to reduce the impact of these cyclones and in order for the better management, it has given a color coding warning. Okay, so what is this color code? It's simply to say that what kind of vulnerability is there and how serious the situation now, in order to give in a very simpler manner to the local communities. For that it has come up with the color code warning. What is it? See, generally it will give blue color cyclone notice. What does it mean? It means there is no immediate threat. However, potential for cyclone, like there is some sort of low pressure or depression which can turn into a cyclone to affect the local people maybe within 5 days or so. And the residents are advised to take precautions and be prepared. If that is turning into cyclone, if it is not dissipating, if it is becoming a violent storm, you need to evacuate and save yourself. That's the message. It goes with that blue color. Then there is yellow color code. It means cyclone watch. What does it mean? Cyclone is now expected to affect the local area within 48 hours. Earlier it was 5 days possibility. Now it is expected like within 2 days it may affect the area. And the residents should begin and continue the necessary preparations for evacuation, saving yourself, going to higher location and all. Then orange warning. What does it mean? It means there is a cyclone warning. Earlier it was cyclone notice or watch. Now actually there is cyclone warning. So what does it indicate? Cyclone is expected to affect the local area within next 24 hours. And residents should prepare and possible they should seek shelter or evacuate themselves. Okay. Then there is red alert. So obviously we know red means danger. That means the danger is imminent. So cyclone is imminent and residents are advised to seek the shelter immediately. Cooperate with the local authorities. See, this will also go as a signal to the local authorities to take up, like prepare. They are prepared. Now take up the evacuation measures even before this cyclone is hitting and save as many people as possible and save them to safe location. Okay, once the cyclone hits and after that it dissipates, then there will be this white code where there is all clear message. That means now it has gone, cyclone has passed, and residents are advised to be like beware of falling power lines, flooded streams, and like post cyclonic effects. So you take care of those post cyclonic effects. In this manner color coding is given. Accordingly the step by step process and information dissemination to reduce the impact of it. Okay, so sometimes they would directly ask the question on the IMD color code warning for management and mitigation of these cyclones. Then you can write all these things. Then next, so for this purpose, as I told you, there are regionally specialized meteorological centers. Okay, 6 of them are there which are classified by World Meteorological Organization. So let's focus on our own region, that is Indian Ocean region. So here there are 13 member countries. Okay, I have given the list of them. You can go through this list. So India is also in this, and in fact India is the leader in here, because the India's meteorological department has been given that status, and it has been given the primary role to monitor, to advise, and also to communicate with other 13 countries. Okay, so here all these 13 members, they suggest, each of them suggests 13 names. So 13 into 13, 169 names list has been made. And from this list, and there are certain guidelines also with respect to this. The guideline is, when you are suggesting a name, the name should not include any persons or anything, and it should be as simple as possible to pronounce. And it should like come with the pronunciation also, so that other people also know. So, and then from this repository, every time whenever there is a cyclone, they will give the name. For example, if you look at the list, Nisarga, Gati, Nivar, Burevi, Thoughtcave, Ash, Gulab, Sahin, all these Mocha, all of them have been used. Here the name is given, here the pronunciation is given. Similarly, till where Remal is done, then Asna, Dana. So these are all the ones. If further ones comes, the names will be Fengal, Shakti, okay. Then there is Monta, okay, Senyar. These are all going to be the names, coming names, okay. And once this cycle is also going, then they will start giving the names here. See, look at India. India has given, these are the names list. I have only given 5. Like there is 13 names which are suggested by India as well, okay. So this is how naming of the cyclone is done. Now, why the naming? So in order to give clarity about which cyclone you are talking about, because sometimes there can be possibility of more than one cyclone, okay. And different locations there can be simultaneously development of different cyclones. Then you cannot simply use the word cyclone. So for that purpose, naming, so that we can identify well, and we can communicate well, and we can take certain uh, disaster management efforts in a better manner, okay. That is the reason, okay. So this is naming of cyclone. Now under mitigation, what else we have taken? These are all under preparedness, early warning, and taking precautions, all of them. Now comes the mitigation. What kind of structural measures can be taken? Say some engineered structures. For example, say if you build a house like this in the storms, storm surge location or coastal location or flood location, there is a high chance that it can flood. Instead, if you modify the structures to take that flood resilient structures like elevated platform or this kind of thing, so then it is less vulnerable to those flooding or storm surges. So structural ones. Then encouraging shelter belts. See, what are shelter belts? These are all series of trees, okay, are planted along the coastline in order to reduce these gusty wind velocities, okay. So this is another one. Here you can use mangroves, you can use various other local native species of trees in order to reduce these fast moving velocity winds during cyclones. Then construction of the roads, which is elevated, can act as a barrier to the cyclone winds. Coastal roads, beach roads, retention walls, etc. Similarly, hazard mapping I have already discussed to know which areas are more vulnerable. Then land use control, such as critical activities जो होते हैं, they should not be in the vulnerable areas. See, here you can also add coastal zone regulations, okay. Under Environmental Protection Act, there is this coastal zone regulations also. There are 4 zones, okay. Zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, and zone 4. So I have made a video a long time on this. Still it is valid, you can go and check it, okay. Which area is zone 1, which area is zone 2, which area is zone 3, and which one is zone 4. If possible, I'll give it in the iCards, you can refer to it. So the criteria and what kind of activities can be taken and what kind of activities are prohibited here, are regulated, okay. So that is another one. Then of course international cooperation, because when a cyclone happens, it can have impact no much larger, maybe sometimes covering more than one nation. So obviously we need to have international cooperation, at least in the basin, all the countries, either for supporting or either for relief measures. So most of the cases, whenever such devastations happen, many countries do give grants, okay, in order to support at the times of the crisis. So this is another step. So these are all some of the steps, okay, of management and mitigation. So under four stages of disaster management, particularly with respect to cyclones, say for preparedness, you can have early warning and always gather your resources, human resources as well as other resources like medicines, food, supplies, water, etc. Make them ready and train your local people. That is also preparedness. Then mitigation, you can take structural, non-structural mitigation measures. So elevated constructions or plantation, shelter belts or mangroves or protecting the coral reefs. They act as a first defense against all these. Okay, so these are all some of the mitigation measures that we can take. Of course, relief is the fast response, and relief is the immediate one. Whenever a disaster happens or when it is happening, you need to provide a lightning response to the people. Then finally, in the recovery stage, when we are building back, we can improve, we can include all these mitigation measures, particularly the structural mitigation measures, to make the locality resilient to the upcoming disasters, because the area is vulnerable. So every year there will be a no incidents. Okay, so in order to withhold, in order to stand to that incidents, you can make it a resilient one by investing in technology, by investing in structure, infrastructure and all other things. Okay, these are all some of the mitigation stages. Okay, so that covers entire cyclone, its meaning, its mechanism, causes, consequences, and what kind of mitigation and management can be done. Now moving on to the next disaster, that is tsunami, another related one. So let us try to look at tsunami. Okay, so tsunami, what is it? See, it's also called as seismic sea wave, or you can say tidal wave or catastrophic ocean wave. Usually why it happens, see, when there is a sudden release of energy within the ocean or within the water body, big water body, there will be displacing of water, and this displaced water will travel, and as it is leading to the coast, so it turn into a huge wave with huge no let's say the amplitude. As a result of it, the coastal areas will be submerged because of this water, and it will have severe other impacts. So as a result of it, it is also considered as a disaster. Now, what are the main causes? The main causes are anything which can create huge disturbance in the big ocean or big water body, be it ocean or a sea. So what are they? For example, let's say if there is a underwater or within the ocean earthquake. So whenever earthquake happens, then also there is a sudden release of energy that will displace the water. Okay. Similarly, if there is a volcanic eruption within the ocean, or if there is a landslide, let's say landslide within the ocean, this is volcanic eruption. Okay. This is earthquake. Or if there is a impact from the sky, let's say a meteor impact, or let's say if there is a satellite, artificial satellite, okay, or big space station is there, space station, or a big launch vehicle, it is falling when we conducted some experiment and the space station failed to stay in the orbit and started falling. So this can also lead to such huge displacement. Or another man-made cause is, let's say, underwater warfare. Okay, war within the ocean, within the waters. When particularly we launch some of the big, massive weapons like torpedoes, etc. So when such these are kind of bombs, very big bombs within the ocean. When they are exploded, there is a huge release of energy, and that will displace huge amount of waters. Again, that can travel and have the similar impact as that of a tsunami. So these are all some of the natural and man-made causes of tsunamis. Okay, now Let us see what is the mechanism of the tsunami and what is the occurrence. See, generally when tsunami happens, it is suggested that instead of being in the coast or being in the coastal side, it would be better if you go into the deep ocean, because the deep ocean people will be less vulnerable. Why less vulnerable? Say, what is the mechanism? If you understand mechanism, you'll understand it. Okay, let's say there is a tsunami. Okay, due to, let's say there is a earthquake or some disturbance, as a result of it, huge energy is displaced. Okay, so this displacement or this energy, actually this oceanic water is now acting as a medium to transfer this energy. Okay, so energy can travel in this direction as well as in this direction. So इस साइड आपका ओपन ओशन है, ठीक है, वो आई एम राइटिंग ओपन ओशन. So as this wave is traveling towards the open ocean, so it will have huge space, huge amount of water. Okay, क्योंकि open ocean में आपका oceanic depth will also be more, amount of water will be more. Slowly what happens, this oceanic open oceanic water side is going to attenuate. धीरे धीरे उसका स्ट्रेंथ कम हो जाएगा एंड मैक्सिमम इट मे हैपन लाइक, देखो एक वेव में क्या होता है, whenever we talk about wave energy traveling in the form of wave, particularly the water waves are like ripples, like transverse waves. So you will have this as the amplitude and this as the wavelength. ठीक है, so generally wavelength and amplitude दोनों inversely proportional होते हैं. See, I'll give some basic wave equation properties. Generally the energy is directly proportional to amplitude. जितना एनर्जी ज्यादा उतना ज्यादा एम्पलीट्यूड. ठीक है. सेकेंड, एनर्जी इज प्रोपोर्शनल टू फ्रीक्वेंसी. ओके, सो ऑफ कोर्स वेवलेंथ एम्पलीट्यूड ज्यादा है तो फ्रीक्वेंसी भी ज्यादा बढ़ेगा. ठीक है. देन एनर्जी इज इनवर्सली प्रोपोर्शनल टू वेवलेंथ. अगर वेवलेंथ ज्यादा है एनर्जी छोटा रहेगा. ठीक है. एंड from here if we compare, so amplitude is inversely proportional to your wavelength. ठीक है. So the one which has gone into the open ocean, उसके लिए wavelength काफी बड़ा है, so obviously amplitude छोटा है, so that doesn't impact much. amplitude मतलब vertical movement, wavelength मतलब horizontal movement करके ले लो. ठीक है. in simple terms, let's say a vertical movement is amplitude and horizontal movement is your wavelength. ठीक है. So as you are entering into the open oceans, the vertical movement is getting attenuated and slowly due to resistance and due to huge amount of water, it gets attenuated and finally dissipated. But the one which is going towards the coast, what is the situation? See, as this energy is moving towards the coastal area, see in the coastal area as you are going, the depth slowly reduces. ठीक है. We know ocean profile. Okay, and slowly towards the continental rise and slope and then finally continental shelf, as the depth reduces, the amount of water available also reduces. अब यहाँ पर जो जाने वाला एनर्जी जो है, एनर्जी तो उतना ही रहेगा, ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा थोड़ा कम होगा बिकॉज ऑफ रेसिस्टेंस. सो एज इट इज मूविंग टूवर्ड्स इट, इनिशियली द वेवलेंथ विल बी हाई, but as it is going, since the area is getting lesser, so it has to conserve that energy, so it increases its wave amplitude and it becomes a very big, very huge oceanic wave, and this is the wave we call it as tsunami. And this is the one which is dangerous because it can have the capability to submerge all the locations in the coastal areas. So this is the reason why the coastal areas are very, very vulnerable and there is a huge amount of flooding. Now this is the mechanism of it. So what are the recent occurrences from Indian specific? See, even now also there are some locations. Recently also Japan has seen tsunami, Indonesia has seen tsunami, but India, what is the tsunami that we have seen? The one which happened in 2004. Here is this animation which you can see where at this location there was this disturbance. As a result of it, the energy displaced, and look at this particular area, how much impact has happened. And it was so severe that impact went up to East African coast and Middle East locations and all. And this has caused us very severe disastrous impacts. In fact, this was the one of the reasons why in 2005 we brought Disaster Management Act to specifically and proactively to deal with disasters in India. So you can give this as a recent occurrence. Apart from that, any international occurrences like the one which has happened in Japan recently. See, this particular region, which is Ring of Fire, Pacific Ring of Fire, is highly vulnerable, and every now and then you can expect there. Okay, so take those examples. That's more than enough. Now, we have seen what is it, and causes of it, mechanism of it, and example. Then what is the impact of it? See, obviously drowning, flooding and drowning, salt water intrusion, life loss, property loss, and destruction of the marine ecosystem, particularly corals will be destroyed, and mangroves in the coastal areas, they will be destroyed. Then saltwater intrusion into the coastal areas. As a result of it, the coastal soils, generally fertile alluvial soils, they may become saline water. Salinization can happen, thereby impacting the agricultural activity, food and aquaculture, fishy culture, pearl culture, all kind of things. Okay, then damage to the critical infrastructure. See, some of the nuclear installations are there on the coastal locations, and military setups are there. Okay, particularly the navy ones, and sewage treatment plants are there, undersea cables are there. For example, fiber cables, अब अंडमान निकोबार को कनेक्ट करने के लिए we have fiber cable. Okay, so such fiber cables, or maybe the gas pipelines, or no, the pipelines which carry crude oil, etc., they may be damaged, leading to oil spills. For example, pipelines, underwater pipelines, if they get damaged, this can even lead to oil spill, and oil spill itself is a disaster. It will have severe impact. Recently some no, Indian company was fined by NZT almost 75 crores, BPCL or some company, because of the oil spill which happened in Chennai location in earlier times. Okay, so ऐसी चीजें न्यूज में देखते रहना, ठीक है. And destruction of corals and mangroves, these are all some to mention. Rest of the things you already know. So it can lead to flooding, it can lead to like mass life loss and infrastructure damage, property damage, and buildings and other things, they may get damaged, and connectivity will be lost. Okay, it can damage or it can impact the trade, international trade, particularly marine trade. Okay, the port areas, they may be impacted, the infrastructure. Okay, these are all some of the impacts of tsunami. Now, what is the mitigation and management? The one thing about these tsunamis is, see, this is energy which is traveling in the ocean. So first, you can predict it or you can detect it early. Vulnerable locations, we know the locations where there can be frequent seismic activity, there can be volcanic activity. So we know the vulnerable areas. And second thing is, we can also take some early warning from the sophisticated technologies that we have now. For example, one of such tsunami early warning system is here. See, let's say, how does it work? Let's say there is a underwater sensitive sensor which can detect any kind of tremors or disturbances in the ocean. Obviously, when this disturbance happen, that is the reason why which displaces the water, right? So you can detect it using some sensors. Second thing is, you can have this kind of floating system which can transmit the signal and notice if any fluctuations in the water levels. Generally waves will be happening, but if the wave amplitude is varying severely, leading to a bigger amplitudes, obviously it can be the reason of like triggering a tsunami, right? So such information will be sent to a satellite which will send it to a data center, and after processing the data, if they get that this is a potential tsunami, then immediately information dissemination, inform the local people. So thereby, see, at least it will take half an hour or 1 hour to travel to that coastal area from that far oceanic location. So within that time period, you can take the evacuation measures, thereby significantly reducing the losses, life loss, property loss, etc. Understood? So this is one of the advantages of early warning. For this purpose, see, we have National Tsunami Hazard Mitigation Program. Okay, similarly, guidance for producing consistent and accurate tsunami inundation and evacuation zones. This is what we call it as hazard mapping. ठीक है, अभी hazard mapping इंडिया में क्या क्या आएगा? Islands and coastal areas. Obviously, east coast is more vulnerable. Okay, because that is more close to your ring of fire, which is seismically very active. Okay, compared to your western coast. Okay, then similarly, you can have annual tsunami exercises. See, international collaborations we have. We collaborate with Indonesia for tsunami exercise, Thailand, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, okay, and even the small island nations. Okay, with them also we collaborate in order to have tsunami training. Then National Tsunami Education and Outreach Action Plan is a very good step in this direction, training the people. Okay, then one more thing, in Hyderabad there is this center as well. I forgot to mention this. So to get this data and check it and give the information dissemination. So these are all some of the specific management measures. Apart from that, you can take general ones like coastal areas. You can grow mangroves. Okay, these are all additional ones which we learned from the earlier. So mangroves and corals, they act as a first defense against any such oceanic disturbances or disasters. Okay, then second thing is we can go with the multi-purpose shelter homes or shelter buildings. Okay, so this is another constructional one. Okay, similarly we can go for shelter belts. ठीक है, shelter belt construct कर सकते हैं coastal areas पे protect करने के लिए, and we can work on this early warning. Okay, by studying or some of the indigenous methods, like for example there are some tribes in Andaman Nicobar who have been experiencing it but successfully handling it. So we can learn the traditional practices from them so that we can reduce our own vulnerability. So these are all some of the mitigation and management measures that can be taken for tsunami reduction or impact of the tsunami, not tsunami reduction but impact of the tsunami. Now, this is all about tsunami. Now, let us move to another one, that is droughts. Very simple. Last 3 years, we did not face much of the drought kind of situation because the monsoons were good because of triple dip La Nina situation. But it is also one of the frequent disaster which visits India, which hits India. So first of all, what is a drought? Again, here also we will follow the same pattern. See, drought is any abnormally dry weather within a geographic region, and it refers to lack of or insufficient rains for a prolonged period over a vast area. Okay, over any geographic area for a vast or prolonged time period. If there is insufficient rainfall, if there is lack of rainfall, we call it as a drought. So during droughts, rainfall is less than the normal, causing stress, water stress, and that will have impact on the agriculture and the food and economic activity and many other things. Okay, so this mainly happens when the rate of evaporation and transpiration is more than the rate of precipitation. Okay, now IMD has classified this drought into 5 categories. What are they? Number 1, meteorological drought. When do we say there is a meteorological drought? It means when for an extended period of time, if there is a dry weather pattern, we say there is a meteorological drought. Then hydrological drought. Hydro means water. So obviously in ponds, rivers, surface water, if the surface water is less than the adequate, then we say there is a hydrological drought. So all the lakes, aquifers, ponds and other reservoirs, if they have less water supply, then we say there is hydrological drought. Then the third variety is agricultural drought. See, generally agricultural purpose के लिए we need moisture in the soil. If the soil is lacking the moisture, thereby not supporting the crops, then we say that is the agricultural drought. So when there is shortage of water significantly destroying the agricultural crops. Then ecological drought. See, this is most recently defined one. What is it? If there is a widespread ecological damage caused due to lack of moisture in the soil, we say there is ecological drought. Similarly, the final one, socio-economic drought. See, let's say certain socio-economic products, consumer products or something, for their production you need water, but due to water scarcity you are not able to produce them. Okay, this kind of drought is what we call it as socio-economic drought. So when there is a shortage of water affecting the supply and demand of some of the commodities such as water, food grain, fish, etc., then we call it as there is socio-economic drought. Okay, sometimes these types can also be asked directly. Then moving further, what are the impacts? See, causes, climate change you can give as a cause. Okay, and lack of water conservation, faulty methods of agricultural irrigation like flood irrigation and other things, water export. Okay, similarly water pollution, huge consumerism, consuming too much of water. Okay, so these are all some of the causes which are leading to that water scarcity. Water scarcity, water stress के लिए जो reasons है, all of them are causes here. And climate change is the biggest driving factor behind such frequent incidences of drought. Okay, now what are the impacts? See, again these impacts can be clubbed into different segments. If you want, you can club like what is the impact on society, on economy, on environment, on other aspects. So you can also like write the general points here. Say for example, water supply reservoirs, they may become empty and wells may dry up. So there can be water shortage. Even for drinking also, you may not be able to get it. Then it will be an extra burden on the public exchequer to provide the drinking water and all. Then groundwater level depletes. Okay, so instead of replenishing, it may deplete, leading to further scarcity and further shortage and agricultural drop, productivity drop. Okay, then soil degradation and erosion can happen. See, the soil may turn into desert, desertification can happen, and thereby reducing your agricultural yield. So when agricultural yield reduces, obviously the food insecurity happens. Also this impacts your animals also, the livestock and poultry and others, they will also have less food supply. Then there is expensive cross damage. Then people become impoverished, like poor, and there are diseases due to malnourishment. Okay, because lack of adequate food supply lead to malnourishment, stunting, wasting, hidden hunger, and also kwashiorkor, marasmus, these kind of diseases. Okay, widespread damage to the ecosystem such as both flora and fauna, they may lose their life. So in this manner you can write about these impacts. So these are all some of the impacts. Then how to manage and mitigate the impact of these droughts, how to take care of inadequate supply of this water, what kind of long-term measures and short-term measures are there. So in short-term measures, you need to supply the water at least for the basic purposes like drinking and for daily consumption for various purposes. Okay, and in long term you need to conserve the water so that this situation gets lessened as the time progresses. So you can take short term, long term measures. So for that purpose, what you need to know, you need to know which areas are highly vulnerable to these droughts. In India, see, this is the mapping which shows the districts which are vulnerable to, district wise, district vulnerable to droughts. See, much of the western locations like parts of Rajasthan, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh. Madhya Pradesh, even the Bundelkhand, parts of it, Bhagelkhand region, and some parts of uh, West Bengal, Odisha, and Telangana and Andhra Pradesh region. See, this entire region falls in the rain shadow region of your Western Ghats. So, as a result of it, this entire region is highly vulnerable to droughts. So, first thing is identifying which areas are highly vulnerable to droughts. Then in these areas we need to support, we need to provide them with some sort of alternative means of livelihood, and also provide them with food, or provide them with requiring water facilities, etc. So here some of the steps. See, vulnerability mapping is one, hazard zonation is another one, and another thing is weather forecasting. Okay, weather forecasting to predict, to give early warning, okay, whether the particular year we are going to have deficit rainfall or surplus rainfall or sufficient rainfall. See, this also can be done as La Nina, El Nino is existing, or Indian Ocean dipole. Okay, similarly some of the extreme events, and taking climate change into consideration, and monitoring monsoons whether they are coming on time or not, with the adequate strength or not. All these things can be monitored nowadays, okay, with the better weather forecasting. We have ensemble system. I think 4 by 4 grid is the one which we are using, 4 kilometer by 4 kilometer. With that we can have the better accuracy in the prediction. So use that in order to give the early warning. Second is the short term and long term measures. So short term में क्या है? You need to provide the affected people with some means of livelihood. So for that, Manrega is a game changer. Mahatma Gandhi नेशनल रूरल एम्प्लॉयमेंट जनरेशन एक्ट, इसके अंदर फूड फॉर वर्क इज देयर, एंड ऑल्सो guaranteed वर्क फॉर 100 days. Particularly drought hit areas में they may even increase it up to 120 days instead of 100 days, extra 20 more days. Okay, and using this, see, short term measure, but using this you can also plan for the long term. How? Through this you can create assets. Okay, assets like check dam, or water body can be built, or like conservation of water, road construction and many other things, canals and all. But these check dams and other things, they can work as a asset for catching the rain and harvesting the rain, so that in the long term this impact can be reduced. Groundwater recharging, and second thing is providing fodder and water to the domestic animals. ठीक है, देखा होगा summers में या peak summer or peak drought kind of situation, many people supply water to the animals and water to the people. You might have seen at some different locations people are giving water. Okay, then conservation of water through rainwater harvesting, building check dams, bunds. For this you can use the Manrega, you can use the CSR, okay, corporate social responsibilities, even the government also provides. Then construction of reservoirs to hold emergency water supplies, maybe the tanks or traditional water harvesting things, roof water harvesting, and going for water efficient crops rather than the water intensive crops. You can go with the millets, you can go with the pulses, you can go with some of the less water requiring crops. Then increased use of drought resistant crops like the millets, I said. Okay, then you can use the scientific irrigation methods, like maybe you can go with the drip irrigation, sprinkle irrigation, or trickle irrigation. Okay, these are all some of them which can minimize the use of water. It will have further advantages as well. Then overcropping and overgrazing should be avoided, and plantation like tree plantations, etc., so that we can increase the green cover. Okay, these are all some measures, some short term, you can write it as short term measures and long term measures. So in that also you can classify it. What are the early warnings, what are the response, what kind of relief can be provided, and what kind of mitigation measures. Mitigation measures may all these things in the short term as well as in the long term we can write it. Okay, so these are all some of the mitigation measures and management strategies to tackle drought. So let me quickly summarize what we have discussed before winding it up. See, today we have covered 3 more natural disasters. What are the ones that we have seen? First, we looked at the cyclones, tropical cyclones. Then we looked at tsunamis. And finally, we looked at droughts. And in all three of them, we have gone with the structure of what is it and what is the mechanism of that particular disaster, what are the causes or factors of that particular disaster, and what kind of consequences are there. Then finally we have looked at what kind of mitigation and management strategies, both structural, non-structural, and also the short term and long term strategies can be taken to reduce these impacts and make the vulnerable locations disaster resilient. Okay, so go through it. On this basis, you can also approach, there are previous year questions. If you want, let me know it in the comment section. Next time onwards, I'll also include the previous year questions for answer writing. Okay, so I hope it is useful. If it is, please let me know. If you want me to cover anything, let me know it in the comment section as well. Okay, and that's it for this particular one. Take care. See you in the next session with the continuation of this and covering other disasters. Thank you very much, guys. See you in the next session. Bye.